Our soil is pretty moist. We've had some afternoon showers the last few days. That's a really good looking sweet tater right there. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Wednesday, August 9th here in South Georgia. Looks like it's going to be another scorcher today, so we've got some sweet potatoes we need to dig this morning before it gets too hot. Later in the day, just a little short half a row of Georgia Jets, but I think we're going to do pretty good from what I've seen already. Before we do that though, I want to show you what's going on with our pumpkin patches here on the back half of the property. So in this little plot, just a few weeks ago, we had some really nice looking giant pumpkin plants. Had two pretty good sized giant pumpkins that were sizing up quick, but the bugs and the heat have taken their toll. Really now all you can see is weeds, a little bit of pumpkin vine right there, but it's just gone downhill really fast. We had this pumpkin here, was looking great. Even though we've got the shade cloth on it, it just melted away. Just couldn't take the heat. I kind of saw it coming, saw it looking a little rough, and then it just started melting down. So this is about 7 days or so worth of melting right here. It didn't happen super fast, but I knew it was coming. Now we still got this pumpkin right here, but I think it has pretty much stopped growing. Doesn't look like it's gotten any bigger in the last couple weeks. That would make sense since we don't hardly have any leaves out here on these pumpkin vines. The bugs and the heat have just decimated the plants. So if I had to guess, I'd say we're somewhere between 150, 175 pounds here. It's about the same size as the bigger one we grew last year. Don't think I'll take it to town and weigh it since it's not ginormous like we hoped for. So another pumpkin season has passed and we have still yet to grow a 500-pound pumpkin like we hoped for. Probably my fault. I planned it a little later this year thinking, well, maybe that will allow my giant pumpkins that I do grow to store into fall a little bit more. I can put one of these big rascals on the porch. In hindsight, that was a bad decision. I need to start as early as I can in spring because the heat just does a number on these things down here, even with the shade cloth in place. So this weekend, I hope to get this plot cleaned up here. We'll try to get that giant pumpkin out of there. We can probably lift it with a sheet, me and somebody else. Get this cleaned up, plant a cover crop here, and just let this plot chill for a little while. Now in front of that plot, we have got an absolute jungle over here, especially with these Seminole pumpkins that are just trying to take over the world. Our sweet potatoes that we're gonna dig in a minute are over there in that corner. And it's going to be tough to get to them, but I think we can manage. So pretty soon we're going to have to get out in this jungle, fight through this vegetation, and harvest these giant butternut squash. These did pretty good. I don't think we grew any absolute monsters. Most of the ones we've got here, I'd say probably 25 pounds, 20 to 25 pounds. Not sure we got any 30 pounders out here. There's another nice one right there, but these did really well for us down here, and definitely be growing these again. These are fun to grow, and man, you get a lot of groceries off just one plant. So we'll show harvesting those pretty soon and show just how much we got off those two plants. And then as far as our Seminole pumpkins grow, a vast majority of these have started to mature and look like they can be picked. Now I won't walk through here like we do in our watermelon patch and just pick a pumpkin here and there. We'll wait and do one mass harvest on these. That means there'll still be a few green ones out here that we'll have to feed to the chickens, but we'll wait till a majority of the fruits have ripened and go through here and harvest them all. The thing about these Seminole pumpkins, they look a little rougher right now, but these plants are so tough, the plants won't really die back like a normal pumpkin plant will. They'll just keep growing and growing and growing. So at some point you just got to call it quits. And then while we're over here, I figured I'd show you some of this beautiful turmeric. It's really liking this shade cloth setup. The plants look a lot less stressed during the heat of the day, and I can tell they're growing a lot faster. Now some of these pumpkin vines are trying to creep into there. We'll take care of that pretty soon once we harvest all these pumpkins and clean this up a little bit. And over here in this taller turmeric row that we planted couple weeks before we planted all those others. That's why it's so much bigger. We finally get to see some of these beautiful blooms we've been looking for a couple years. So this is our 3rd year growing turmeric. I've never seen it bloom. We've still got good harvest from it, even though it hasn't bloomed. But there we go. Man, those are pretty right there. And then over here on this side of that big plot, we've got our little 12 to 15 foot row of Georgia Jet sweet potatoes that we planted back in early May. Now, as I've told you before, with sweet potatoes, unlike regular potatoes, the plants aren't going to really tell you when they're ready to harvest. Those plants will keep growing and growing as long as it's still warm outside. So you really got to keep up with your planting date so you know when to harvest. If you leave them in the ground too long, they'll get big and gnarly and split on you. So as I told you earlier, we've got an absolute jungle here. Sweet potato plants, pumpkin plants running into those, flowers over here. Hard to kind of tell where one plant ends and another starts. We planted these on May 3rd. Today it is August 9th. So we're right at about 95 days or so from planting. Georgia Jet, I think, has a maturity of 90 days. We should be good to go, but just to be sure, I came out here earlier and pulled up one of the plants, saw that puppy right there, and I said, yep, we need to get these out of the ground. So when you're harvesting sweet potatoes, oftentimes it takes longer to clear the vines than it actually does to dig the sweet potatoes themselves. Now, in the past, I came in here and mowed down the vines a few days before harvesting. That was when I was kind of growing them on the flat. But now that we're mounding up around the plants, we've got a nice little hill here. We can't really mow this hill without scalping a bunch of our sweet potatoes. So we're just going to have to clear these vines by hand. I don't like to clear a vine, dig, clear a vine, dig. We're going to clear all these vines out of here, then we can dig all our sweet taters. All right, so that's the hard part, or I should say the labor intensive part. Now it should be pretty easy. We can see what we're doing here. We can see every spot where we put a sweet potato slip back in early May. And one little tip here, when you're clearing these vines, get them out of your garden plot. Throw them in the yard, throw them in your burn pile, compost pile, feed them to your animals, whatever. You don't want to leave them in here because they will re-root, and you're not going to have enough time before your first frost to make another crop of sweet potatoes. So if we're planting a cover crop here next, we don't want a bunch of volunteer sweet potato plants in here that aren't going to do anything. So we try to get as many of those vines out of here as possible. All right, so now let's do a little digging. We know we've got one plant right here. Now with these traditional sweet potato varieties with the long trailing vines like Georgia Jet, Beauregard, Orleans, all those, you will sometimes get some taters forming off the hill a little bit. We call those pin taters because the plants pin down over here and produce some more taters. We don't always get them, but sometimes we do. The whole hilling process, the idea there is to try to make them all form in that hill, kind of bunching up the plants there as they grow. But I can see one pin tater right here. See if I can dig it up. Not a bad one either. So that's what we call a pin tater. We'll look and see if we see any of those. I'm not going to dig too far outside my hill. That's a nice little extra bonus to have. So we'll keep an eye out for any more pin taters, but we're going to mostly focus on this hill here where we planted our slips. Our soil is pretty moist. We've had some afternoon showers the last few days. That's a really good looking sweet tater right there. Unlike regular taters, I have to dig for these a little bit because I don't want to get that out of the way too, because these roots are so dense here. Even though the soil is soft, I can't really scratch around here with my hands a whole lot. There's some little baby ones right there. I can see some more right here. Get down in there, get them lifted up. Try not to scratch them up too much with the fork. Little baby bacon taters right there. Not too shabby so far. Alright, so our first plant did pretty good there. Now let's see what we've got under the second plant. And just a note here, when you dig a hill of sweet potatoes like this under one plant, you're not going to get all of them looking like that. You may get a few of those, what we call number ones, and you'll get some smaller ones like this right here. So they won't all look the same, but that's okay because you got different size sweet potatoes for different things you can do with them. Let's see if we can lift these up without stabbing any of them here. Not bad, not bad. Traditionally, these Georgia Jets are a little more round than long, like we see right there. We will get a few long ones, but a lot of times these aren't quite as long as some of the other varieties. Looks like we got a big one right here. Yep, see, that's what can happen if you leave them in the ground too long. They get too big, start to split, and they look pretty gnarly like that one right there. All right, all right, all right. So not a bad little harvest from 10 or 12 plants here along that little strip. Some of these are on the small side. We might could have left these in the ground a little longer, but we did have a few that had gotten too big, and I also had a few nice ones out there that were starting to rot. So even though we do have a few small ones, I think we dug them at the right time. Now, I'm not just saying this because some of these are on the smaller side, but I actually prefer this size right here over a real big sweet potato. I know it's unusual to hear somebody from the South say this, but I don't really like baked sweet potatoes with butter and cinnamon all sweetened up like that. I like my sweet potatoes to be salty. So the way we cook these most of the time is we'll cut them up in little wedges, roast them in the oven, or cut them up in little cubes and put them in the air fryer. So we put salt on our sweet potatoes, not sugar, butter, cinnamon, all that. So these big ones like this right here, not a huge fan of these. Well, for one, they're really hard to cut up and kind of dangerous to cut sometimes. You got to be careful. Your knife slips, you can lose a finger real quick. Like these right here are a lot easier to cut up for what we're going to do with them. So these Georgia Jet potatoes perform well for us as usual again, and according to the folks at Steel Plant Company, they say this is the best tasting sweet potato variety out there, and I would kind of have to agree with them. These are some pretty tasty sweet potatoes. Now, if last year was any indication, the Orleans sweet potatoes we have planted in one of our no-till plots, still probably got another month or so before we dig those, should perform a little better than these, should give us a little more consistent size, but I'm not mad about what we harvested here at all. And just to recap real quick, our growing techniques or growing practices on these, we started out by making a mound where our row was going to be. We put some pre-plant fertilizer, balanced fertilizer along that row. We stuck our slips down into that mound. Once the plants got up and going a little bit, we side dressed with some organic potassium called langbonite, and I think we healed them one more time when we did that. One of the things we did different this year was make sure we gave the plants consistent water. That was based on recommendations from Steel Plant Company. So sweet potato plants are pretty drought tolerant, and they won't really let you know when they need water until it gets really, really dry. But we had these on the drip system with our pumpkins and everything else. We were able to give them some consistent water, and I think it paid off. The other thing we did was not mess with the vines at all, not cut the vines, just let them roam. That's another thing Steel told us to do, and that seemed to help as well. Now, I mentioned those Orleans sweet potato plants that we have in one of our no-till plots. We also have 2 raised beds with the Bunch Puerto Rico sweet potato variety. I think we planted those a couple weeks after we planted these, and I think that variety has a longer maturity date. I want to say it's somewhere around 110, 120 days. So we'll probably be digging those in the next couple weeks. We'll see how the raised beds do compared to in ground here, and then like I said earlier, in another month or so we'll dig those Orleans, which I really have high expectations for. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Be sure to check out our affiliate links and coupon codes in the description below. Also go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com. And if you want to see that video we did earlier this year talking about all those good sweet potato growing tips from Steel Plant Company, you can check that out right here. We'll talk about fertilization, the importance of consistent watering, all that good stuff. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.